Hi everyone, it's Melissa from the blog hymnsandhome.com, and today we're going to make a Valentine's wreath made out of dried grapefruit slices. You may have seen the whole craze with dried oranges during Christmas and winter, but I love the beautiful pink color that grapefruit has, and I think it would be perfect for Valentine's Day. I'm going to show you the best way to dry your grapefruit slices, how to make the base for your wreath, and then how to assemble your wreath. You're going to want to plan ahead with this project. It's going to take about 2 days in all. You're going to need about a day for drying and then about an additional hour for assembly. We're going to dry the grapefruit slices low and slow so that they don't scorch and you end up with a beautiful pinkish red color. All right, let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is preheat our oven, and I'm just going to put it on the warm setting. I'm using the warming feature on my oven, which according to my thermometer that I use to monitor the temperature, only keeps my oven around 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, ideally, we would keep these baking between 120 and 130 degrees Fahrenheit. That would be a nice low and slow process, which would prevent them from scorching or over browning and will give us a really nice, pretty finish. That being said, doing it at that low a temperature will take a considerable amount of time, anywhere from 8 to 24 hours potentially. How long it takes really depends on how thickly you sliced your grapefruit, how big your grapefruit is, and how many baking sheets you managed to stuff in your oven at one time. I have 5 in there right now. I didn't even know that I had 5 baking sheets, but I did find 2 that were left over from my husband's bachelor days. So I managed to shove all 5 in my oven, and that is making it take a little bit longer because there's so much humidity and stuff in there. Now, every now and then I will go over and just open up the oven to help vent out some of that steam. Now, if you're looking for a faster drying time, you can increase your oven temperature to up to 200, but you will need to monitor your fruit more closely to make sure that it doesn't scorch. You'll want to be sure to remove any stickers from your fruit before you start. I picked some large, some small to give us a variety of size in our wreath. We're not going to use the very ends of these. I'm just going to compost those. But we are just going to cut these up into about 1/4 inch slices. Try to make them as even as possible. And I am actually using a serrated knife. This is by CUTCO. I am not affiliated with CUTCO in any way, but I love this knife. It is this, I forget what it's called, but it's this serrated one. And I love using this for fruits and vegetables, just cutting up an apple, anything like that. But we are just going to slice all of these up in nice, even slices. When you get to the very end, if it's difficult to hold on to this little tiny bit, I actually will take a fork and just poke it into the very end like this so I can hold it and get my last even slice without getting my fingers in the way. The number of grapefruit you need really depends on the size of the wreath you want to make and how much you want to spend on this. I didn't want to spend a fortune on grapefruit, so I'm going to make a moderately sized heart wreath. I bought 2 of these very large grapefruit and then 6 other more moderately sized grapefruit. You absolutely do not need to stress about the exact number of grapefruit that you buy because we're actually going to create our wreath form after we've already dried our oranges, laid everything out, and figured out how big a wreath we can make. So just know that if you want to make a very large wreath, you're going to need quite a few grapefruit, and if you want to make a small wreath, you're not going to need as many grapefruit. Pretty much just common sense. And you have to keep in mind the space you have in your oven. I just squished 5 baking sheets into my little oven, and we're just going to call that the maximum number I'm going to do for this wreath. Once you have a good number of your grapefruit sliced, you're going to want to line 2 or 3 baking sheets with parchment paper. A little trick I've seen if you're having trouble getting your parchment paper to lay flat is actually to crumble it up and spread it back out, and it will lay flat. We're just going to place all of our slices on the baking sheets. If you have one that's a little bit uneven, you can lay it flat on your cutting board and then very carefully, going away from yourself, run the knife parallel to the grapefruit slice and shave off a little bit. This is only if you're concerned about it being nice and even. I do not always get them perfect on the first try. Not that they're perfect afterward either, but at least it's a little closer. There we go. That one's better. This one looks a little lumpy too. So we are going to shave a little bit off that one as well. And all of these scraps will either go in the compost pile or be given to my husband to gnaw on as a snack. One of the nice things about this project is that it will keep for next year and you can use it again if you store it properly. So with dried fruit slices, you want to be sure that your slices are completely dry before you start adding them to your wreath. And then you want to make sure you store your wreath in a dry spot. Otherwise, if it's exposed to moisture, it will start to mold, which is really disgusting. Also want to make sure you're going to store your wreath somewhere safe so that it doesn't get crushed or start to shatter. This is a very hands-off process. I'll do the kind of warm up the oven, put them in there, turn off the oven. You definitely want to monitor your oven and stuff if it's on, so don't leave the house or anything. But generally, you can just let it alone, let it do its thing, and you'll be good. With this low and slow method, I do flip them at some point. It doesn't really matter when. You just want to kind of monitor them here and there. And if one side starts to look pretty dry, then you can flip it over. Really, what I'm trying to say is that the low temperature offers you a lot of flexibility and kind of a safety net to make sure you end up with a good product. I'm actually going to use my probe thermometer. This is an OXO probe thermometer. I have it linked below if you're interested. I use it for everything. I use it for meat, I use it for baking, just monitoring oven temperature, all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to set this up on the counter. I am just going to lay the probe inside, shut the door, and then it will give me a readout on this display of the current temperature. So once I'm up to about 125, 130, I'll go ahead and shut the oven off. And I'm actually going to set an alarm on here. You can set a custom temperature alarm. So I'm going to set mine for 130 degrees, and it will start beeping at me when it reaches that. And at that point, I will turn off the oven. I will only turn the warming feature back on if the temperature drops too low. So I would say if it gets below 100 degrees, I'll turn it back on to warm things back up. I just want to show you on here the progress that these grapefruit are making. Now, these are turning a lovely, lovely color, but I want to show you the difference. Some of these are regular pink grapefruit, and some of these are a large red grapefruit. So you can see here the difference. These pink grapefruit are turning really kind of a blush pink with a slight orangish tint, and these large red grapefruit are turning that really pretty red color. I think having both of these in the mix will be a really nice combination. Once you have all your grapefruit slices dry, we're going to lay out some parchment paper. You want your parchment paper to be large enough to be able to fit your whole wreath on it, because what we're going to do is we're going to lay out our grapefruit slices, and then we're going to just trace around it and cut out our heart shape on the parchment paper so that we can transfer that to some cardboard to make our backing. So if you need to, you can tape a few pieces of parchment paper together. All right, I have my 2 pieces of parchment paper taped together so it's big enough for my wreath. And then we're just going to start laying these out in a heart shape. And this isn't going to be your exact final layout. You just want to get an idea of how big you want your wreath to be. All right, that's a pretty good estimate of how big I want my wreath to be. So I'm going to take a pen and I'm just going to roughly trace around the outside here. We will clean this up when we cut it. Oops. Now what we're going to do to make sure this ends up nice looking and even is we're going to look for the middle point of our heart here. You probably can't see that, but here's the bottom point and here's where it curves around. We're just going to fold it in half right along that line. You could certainly use paper or something less slippery for this. I just decided to use parchment paper since it was big enough. I didn't have any paper large enough for this. Now we're just going to cut this out, kind of like we did in grade school, to make a heart. And just kind of round it out, clean it up as you go. All right, I have something that looks like this. If you're happy with that, then we can move on to the next step. Now we're going to need a big piece of cardboard. I'm using this big old white box here, and I'm going to cut out the bottom. There we go. Now we're going to lay out our pattern. Okay, this cardboard's just large enough, so we are going to trace around it with our permanent marker. And it doesn't have to be exactly perfect because it is going to get covered up by our fruit slices. All right, done with this. Now we're going to cut out our heart. At this point, we're going to make a small incision in the middle, and we're going to hollow out the center of the wreath. Please be super careful when you're doing this so you don't get your fingers. Always cut away from yourself. And I would leave enough border that it's about the width of one grapefruit slice so that you can get that base grapefruit slice really solidly glued on there. I still remember one time when I was little, I was doing a project. I was probably about 10, I guess, and I was cutting cardboard, and I wanted to make a hole in the middle of the cardboard. So I stuck the point of the scissors straight through the cardboard, only my finger was on the other side, and the scissors went straight into my finger. Don't do that. I just plugged in my hot glue gun and I'm going to get that heating up over here. It's not a bad idea when you're working with hot glue also to keep a small bowl of ice water nearby so that if you get it on your finger, you can just immediately dip your fingers in the ice water. For my hanger, I'm going to use this little tab from an aluminum can. I'm just gonna glue it right on the back of the wreath to hang it. I've also decided that I am going to use the white side. Even though this is the side with tape, I'm going to use the white side as the front of my wreath because I am hoping that the white color will help illuminate the pretty grapefruit colors more. My hanger on the back of my wreath is dry now, so I am going to start hot gluing my grapefruit slices onto the front of the wreath. I'm going to start with just a single layer around the whole wreath, and then we're going to start overlapping them and building it up. Try to mix up the larger and smaller slices so you don't have them all on top or all on bottom. Also, if you're using the varied colors like I am, try to mix those up as well. All right, I have all of my grapefruit slices glued on. Now I didn't actually use all of them, but I came very close. So I ended up with about this many left. Ooh, I can hold it in the sunlight. It kind of catches the light. I love that color. So you can either leave it like this, or I'm going to try putting a ribbon on mine and see how it looks. I found this ribbon at Hobby Lobby, I think it was. It's actually crochet trim, and I bought it not knowing exactly what I would do with it, but that it would be perfect for Valentine's Day. The simplest way I like to make a bow for my wreaths is really just an old-fashioned way like we used to learn to tie our shoes. So I just take a length here. This is going to be one side, one tail. I make a loop. Okay. Make another loop right next to it. It's 2 loops with 2 tails. And you're just going to tie those in a single knot. Pull it through. You don't even have to cut your ribbon to do this. You can try it out while it's still attached to the spool. See if you like the size and the length and stuff before you cut the end. And if you want to undo this, you just pull the loose end and it will come undone. So I'm going to hold this up to my wreath and see how I like the size. Yep, I think I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my end over here. I like to leave the tails of my ribbons on my wreaths really long. I just like to see them drape. And I like to be all fancy and cut my ribbon ends on a V. Then I'm just going to hot glue it on to the front of my wreath. I love how it catches the light. It reminds me so much of stained glass. I would love to know what other Valentine's activities and traditions you have in your household. You can tell me in the comments below. I'm also planning to share soon a Valentine's tablescape as well as Valentine's treats. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe for more cottage living, and I so appreciate you watching. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.